beautiful people, how are you feeling? We are House Gospel Choir and we are honoured to be here with you today. Right now, we're inviting you to be our house guest. So welcome to our house.
Obviously, we've been going through some very trying times. That's right. It's been hard, it's been lonely, it's been scary. But in our house, we believe that we can get through anything together.
Let's go.
Oh my, alarm is ringing so loud, telling me to get out and face the rhythm of my life.
You're on your face.
You're on your face.
Get on your feet.
Follow me.
You're not there.
You've got love.
Your heart still beats.
Your heart still beats.
You're not giving
up.
to what we're living.
Follow me.
Blind faith will see us through.
I know life.
2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Can feel life.
2 steps forward, let me take 2 steps back. 2
Sometimes.
steps forward, 2 steps back.
But if you just believe,
Nothing's gonna hold us back.
Oh,
2
life
steps forward, 2 steps back.
feels
2 steps forward,
like
let me take 2 steps back. 2 steps forward,
sometimes
2 steps back.
but if you just believe,
Nothing's gonna hold us back.
Oh my, head is banging last night. I went to sleep with no dreams. Tell me what it means.
you only fail if you quit. Take your time.
You got this.
We got this, no giving up,
What we're living.
no giving in. Blind faith will see us through. Oh, life, oh,
2
life
steps back.
feels
2 steps
like.
forward.
Oh,
Let me take 2 steps back. 2 steps forward.
sometimes
2 steps back.
But if you just believe,
Nothing's gonna hold us back. Nothing's
believe.
gonna hold us back.
you gotta keep moving forward.
Nothing's gonna hold us back.
No matter what you do,
Nothing's gonna hold us back.
life gives us a break.
Blind faith will see us.
will see us through.
2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Feels
2 steps forward.
like.
Let me take 2 steps back.
If you just believe,
Nothing's gonna hold us back.
I know life
I know
feels like
2 steps forward. Let me take 2 steps back.
walk by faith and not by sight.
That's right. You got this.
The House Gospel Choir setting the mood for our final plenary session and totally nailing how to close the distance, be creative and fabulous in pandemic times. Hi, I'm Femi Oke, your plenary host on the third and final day of the 2021 Skull World Forum. What a programme we've had. Check out the pictures and posts at #SkullWF to see how your fellow attendees have been closing the distance. Coming up, 4 excellent reasons to stay online with me for the next hour. We have Audrey Tang, who's Taiwan's digital minister, activists Mark Ruffalo and Gloria Wharton, and the veteran journalist Maria Ressa, who'll be giving a keynote. We start with Maria. Journalists on the whole never want to be the story. They'd rather report it for you. When a journalist is in the news, that's really a good thing. Maria has been making headlines in the Philippines for the past few years as she fought for the right for journalists to report freely. As an investigative reporter based in Southeast Asia, Maria spent years investigating terrorism. You may remember some of her work for international news networks like CNN and Al Jazeera. In 2012, Maria co-founded the Philippines' first multimedia news site, Rappler. It caught the attention of President Duterte, who declared its output to be fake news whenever a story he didn't like appeared online. Duterte's government tried to revoke Rappler's license to do business, accused Rappler of tax evasion, and tied the news organisation up in a whole series of court cases. Maria and her team fought every attack on their right to operate freely as journalists. I've lost count of the number of times she's been arrested and then released. Last year, Maria and a former colleague were found guilty of cyber libel, a new law that was applied retroactively. They could face 6 months to 6 years in prison and are currently in court appealing that verdict. Outspoken, fearless, and never wavering in her fight for press freedom, Maria Ressa is respected by journalists and human rights activists around the world. She joins the Skoll World Forum to deliver our closing plenary keynote. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yes, perfect.
Hello from Manila, and thank you for your time. I feel that there's so much at stake for our world today, and what we do this year could potentially determine what our next decade will look like. Closing the distance has never been harder. I have 3 points I want to share with you. First, my context and why the lessons I'll share are hard-earned. Second, I'll define the problem. And finally, share the principles we're using to live our way into the solution, because we must. So why should you care about the Philippines? Because for the 6th year in a row, Filipinos spent the most time online and on social media globally. 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. According to Hootsuite and We Are Social, YouTube this year overtook Facebook as the top social media site here. And because of the pandemic, new users are coming online in Southeast Asia at a blistering pace, adding 40 million new internet users last year compared to 100 million the previous 5 years. As this is happening, it is getting harder and harder for journalists to hold power to account. I know this. In less than 2 years, the Philippine government filed 10 arrest warrants against me. That's 10 criminal charges, 10 times I've posted bail, because I'm doing my job. Last June, I and a former colleague were convicted of cyber libel for a story we published 8 years earlier at a time the crime we allegedly violated didn't even exist. All told, all these charges carry a cumulative penalty of more than 100 years in prison. It's crazy. Okay, but it's not all bad, right? There's hope. I think I bring 3 strands together that help me find the way forward and stay hopeful. First, I head our business and tech, so I'm forced to evaluate the changes and build for the future. Second, I'm an investigative journalist. And finally, I'm the target of attacks online and in the real world. So I get to see these evolving tactics and tell you about them. On International Women's Day, the International Center for Journalists analyzed nearly 500,000 social media posts and showed that 60% were aimed to tear down my credibility, built up over 35 years of journalism, to tear down trust in our reporting. The other 40% are visceral. They're personal, sexist, and misogynistic attacks meant to pound me to silence. As you can see, that's not working. But this brings us to the problem we need to solve if we are to close the distance. American biologist E.O. Wilson said it best. We're facing Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Social media has become a behavior modification system, and we are Pavlov's dogs, experimented on in real time with disastrous consequences. Facebook is the world's largest distributor of news, and yet studies have shown that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than really boring facts. The very platforms in social media that deliver the facts to you are biased against facts. They're biased against journalists. They are, by design, dividing us and radicalizing us. Let me give you an example we've lived through in the Philippines. One technical decision made by every social media platform, that's to grow with algorithms recommending friends of friends, right? They've all realized that's the most efficient way through A/B testing. So in 2016, after Rodrigo Duterte used social media to help him get elected, this friends of friends algorithm, along with this divisive us against them rhetoric, did this. Here we were, all agreed on the facts in the center. We didn't debate the facts. But if you're pro Duterte and you were getting recommendations to grow your network for friends of friends, you move further right. If you're anti Duterte, you move further left. And over time, 5 years, the chasm grew. The algorithms also radicalize. They bring you down the rabbit hole. And this is best shown in the work of Renee DiResta, she looked at do-it-yourself moms on Facebook who formed a group to make their own baby food, right? If you were in that group, Facebook recommended you join anti-vax groups. And if you clicked on their recommendation, then the next recommendation you got for a group was QAnon. This is the impact of a business model Shoshana Zuboff called surveillance capitalism. When a system gathers your data, knows you better than you know yourself, and serves your most vulnerable moment to a message, to a company, that's called the new advertising, or to a government, the new propaganda, changing your behavior. In today's world, a lie told 1,000,000 times becomes a fact. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without any of these three, democracy as we know it, and beyond that, all meaningful human endeavor becomes impossible. Without facts, we have no shared reality, and it becomes impossible to tackle the existential problems our world faces today: climate change, coronavirus, the battle for truth. We are living in the matrix, fed an illusion we are predisposed to believe, determined by power and money, and our shared reality is splintered into more than 3 billion Truman shows. So what are we going to do? How do we close the distance? It's been nearly 5 years for us in Rappler that we've been living through this hell. In order to live our way into the answer, we focus on 3 pillars. I like threes: technology, journalism, and community. On technology, we have 2 initiatives. I'm working very hard with global groups to find regulations that will leave the best and put guardrails on the worst of text manipulations. Last year, I co-chaired the Infodemics Working Group with former EU Parliament member Marit Kashak. She's now in Stanford. In our paper released last November by the Forum on Information and Democracy, we recommended 12 systemic solutions and more than 250 tactical steps. I'm watching closely the evolution of the EU's Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, the UK's Online Harms Bill, the US debate on Section 230. Separately, we at Rappler are building our own tech that protects the public sphere, that protects the facts, that protects the users. We rolled out our new platform called Lighthouse last year and continue to build not just for distribution, but for our communities to grow. When we created Rappler, my elevator pitch is simple. We build communities of action. The food we feed our communities is journalism. We must help independent news organizations survive, because even as the dangers increase for us, the mission of journalism has never been more important. That's part of the reason I sit on the advisory board of the International Fund for Public Interest Media, which aims to raise $1 billion a year to help news organizations survive. In many ways, the virus of lies in the virtual world is more dangerous than the coronavirus because it is not only highly contagious. When you get infected, you become impervious to facts. You change the way you look at the world. You become angrier, more isolated, and it erupts in events like January 6th on Capitol Hill. Like a drug addiction, it will take years for rehabilitation to close the distance and bring back a shared reality. So what do we do? I became a journalist because I knew that information is power. Now we have to act, to come together and realize that an atom bomb has been dropped on our information ecosystem. And just like the world did after World War II, when it created NATO, Bretton Woods, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, We need to upgrade our medieval institutions to put safeguards around the godlike technology that is manipulating our biology, our Paleolithic emotions. In some ways, I feel like I've jumped out of the plane and I don't know whether my parachute will open high enough for me to survive. What you do at this time matters. Please act now. Close the distance.
I caught up with Maria earlier. After her keynote, we sat down to discuss some of the critical issues that she's been campaigning about, like the access digital platforms have to our personal data. How far do we need to go to protect ourselves? I asked Maria if we had to wean ourselves off current social platforms and find new ways of communicating.
I think this is, this thing of enlightened self-interest. I think they built their way into this. I don't know how it was by accident, but that's what happened. And now they have to have the political will to treat the facts differently from lies, right? That's the fundamental problem. That's why we are in a battle for facts and for truth, because all of the social media platforms treat the data, unlike journalists. They don't make a distinction between lies, which spread faster, and facts. So they must do that. So that means they have scale. We're already there. They're just going to have the political will to say we need to protect the public sphere. We need to protect our rational way of thinking. And so we're going to have to make less money.
There are many people in the world of media and outside of the world of media who look up to you, who see your fight in the Philippines, who see what Rappler is doing right now, standing up against fake news, the infodemic, as you described it. It's more dangerous, perhaps, than COVID-19 even. But there is also responsibility from us as consumers. What is that responsibility? How do we share the burden? It can't be just on your shoulders.
So I don't think it's on my shoulders. I think if you were in my place, you would be doing the same thing. We grew up at a time when this was the mission of journalism, right? And I don't think I have any other choice but to do what I'm doing. Having said that, I've heard a lot of news managers kind of like beat themselves up to say, what could we have done? What did we do? Should we be building trust? And then I hear users just like you did. It's really the users. It's really them. I mean, that's certainly what we hear from social media, right? We need media literacy. That's not true. Go back to E.O. Wilson's quote, right? This is manipulating our biology, our Paleolithic emotions. It takes the weaknesses of human nature and manipulates it. It's almost like you went to a psychologist. I'm gonna quote Tristan Harris, like you went to a psychotherapist and you told your psychotherapist your deepest, darkest secrets. And then he goes out and says, I've got this for sale. We have no defenses against this. And that is something we've seen. Look, the other optimistic way to redefine this is to realize that all of us around the world actually have far more in common than we have differences, because those global companies are affecting us all the same way. So, there's no solution for how to manipulate our emotions, how to manipulate our mind. Pavlov's dogs. So the only solution is to make it illegal. We're there. This is how potent the technology is. And we've got to realize that.
I am clicking on your Twitter page right now. Idealist, skeptic, pragmatist, journalist, author, CEO, Rappler. Which person wrote that keynote?
Wow. I guess all, right? So I'm more emotional than I would normally be because of the times, right? And because I'm talking to you. I mean, we became journalists at a far easier time. I just see the runway getting shorter. But I don't have any other choice. I know that whether I go to jail or not will depend on how well we fight the battle for facts.
Give us an assignment. The Skull World Forum attendees are watching you right now. What assignment would you give us?
I give you 3. Demand accountability from technology, put those guardrails in, help independent media survive. And the third one is do more. I've been forced to ask myself, what am I willing to sacrifice for the truth? You are so powerful. Help communities come together. Do more. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? This is it. That's the precipice we're standing on. And the more you do, the greater the chances I won't go to jail.
Okay, thank you so much. How can we fail that assignment? There's a lot of pressure right there, and we're willing to take that on. Maria Ressa, idealist, skeptic, pragmatist, journalist, author, CEO of Rappler. Thank you for the assignment. Thank you for the keynote. We go from Manila in the Philippines to Oxford in the UK to talk about Taiwan with Audrey Tang. Stay with me. The next film is so good. Audrey Tang is Taiwan's digital minister. An accomplished software programmer, Audrey's professional and personal story is compelling. The minister is full of surprises, and thanks to Jess Search, friend of the Skull World Forum, you are about to see the best, most surprising interview I have watched this year. Jess, you're a genius. Now, I did say we were heading to Oxford, which is where Jess Search is right now. Hi, Jess. Can you hear me?
Femi, yes. Hi, I can hear you. I tell you what, though, I'm down here at Said and it's pretty dead. Yeah, I looked through the glass and I went around the back. Yeah, no social entrepreneurs, no social investors, no thought leaders, just pretty much tumbleweed. Yeah, where is everybody? Ah, there you are. Oh, now I see you. Is that pajamas? Looks like you're on the sofa, maybe with the dog, is that? At home. Well, to those of you who've been to the forum before, I bet you're missing Oxford right now. But rest assured, the city is missing you too. Missing your dynamism, your ideas, your laughter, missing your big dance moves. And to those of you who are new to the Skull community, welcome. And I hope to meet you here next year in the city of the Dreaming Spires. In the meantime, walk with me. I'm going to stroll over to the examination schools to meet Audrey Tang. She is the digital minister of Taiwan, Republic of China. She is a techno-optimist. She believes governance could be more beautiful, and she played a vital role in her country's COVID response. So come with me, we'll take the scenic route. There is a certain poetry to using the examination rooms where Oxford students sit their finals to interview a literal child genius who dropped out of school at 14 to design her own education online. She didn't need this place. There are a few other things you need to know about Minister Tang before you meet her, so I'm going to give you the lowdown as we go. The first thing is that I am officially obsessed with her. Yes, in preparing for this interview, I have tumbled down the Audrey rabbit hole, and my assumptions about what's possible in a democracy will never be the same again. And I'm going to share that experience with you. The second is that Audrey was coding at 8 years old and later worked as an open source software developer. Now she's hacking government itself. The third is that she was part of Taiwan's Sunflower student movement. In 2014, they occupied the Parliament building for 3 weeks in protest at a controversial trade deal. When a new government was elected 2 years later, she became, at the time, the youngest minister without portfolio in Taiwanese history. And I love that she says she works with the government, but not for the government. The last thing you need to know is that Audrey is championed as the first openly trans minister of Taiwan, indeed the first openly trans minister anywhere, but now identifies as post-gender. Her rejection of gender binaries reflects her rejection of binaries of all kinds. She believes there cannot be two sides to any argument, because once you get everyone involved, there is space to find shared values. Are you ready to meet her?
Hello.
Minister Tang, Audrey, it is wonderful to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, very nice meeting you again, and good local time, everyone.
So we have to start with the pandemic because it's the reason that our audience are not meeting you in person in Oxford right now. In Taiwan, the Republic of China, you've had only 10 COVID deaths so far, whereas in my country, here in the UK, we are already over 125,000 lives lost and still climbing. So if this was the Olympic Games, you're well on the way to the gold medal, I think. Has it surprised you how badly countries like the UK, the US and Brazil have handled the pandemic compared to Taiwan? Or did you predict that? Did you see this coming a year ago, that we would be in such divergent places now?
It's not exactly surprising because the first time when SARS 1.0 hit Taiwan in 2003, we also reacted quite haphazardly. We had communication failures between the municipal and the central government. We had to lock down an entire hospital unannounced. The Constitutional Court said that it would be unconstitutional if we had a chance to predict something like it would happen, which we didn't. And so I think we have sympathies of what you're going through. But in Taiwan, in 2004, right after SARS, we institutionalized our counter-epidemic command center task force, including the unified communication strategy, universal mask use and stockpile and so on, into the institutional memory with yearly drills so that something like that would not happen again in Taiwan. And I hope that everyone else would do the same after this round of vaccination.
So you're saying that the secret to a gold medal is practice?
Well, our previous inoculation in all of society.
Another aspect of your COVID response leads us on to the main issue that I wanted to explore with you, which is your political philosophy more generally, and your introduction of participatory democracy to parts of the government's work. Can you talk about how that works in the first instance around the COVID response, but also kind of more generally your view of its role in society?
I think the government need to trust the people. The people may or may not trust back, but to give no trust is to get no trust. So the key to this fast counter-pandemic and counter-infodemic response is this ability to listen at scale so that anyone with a good idea can very quickly amplify it through official participation channels to the entire country. Comparing this to the old style of democracy, which is called voting, which is 3 bits per person of information uploaded every 4 years, we massively increased the bit rate. For example, I mentioned a toll-free number 1922 that people can call. Well, more than 2 million calls were placed to that call center over 2020, many of them asking for clarification for counter-pandemic strategy, but also many offering their innovations. For example, there's a professor that called saying, I invented a way using the traditional rice cooker. If you don't add water, turns out that dried heat can kill the virus without destroying the mask. Well, turns out he was correct. Or last April, there was a very young boy who called saying, hey, you're rationing out mask, and all I get was pink medical mask. I don't want to wear it to school, for all the boys in my class have navy blue medical grade mask. I don't want to wear pink to school. Well, the very next day, on the 2 p.m. CECC press conference, all the medical officers wore pink regardless of their gender. And Commander Chen Shizhong, the Minister of Health, even said that Pink Panther was his childhood hero. So the boy immediately, overnight, literally became the most hit boy in the class because only he has the color that the heroes wear and the hero's hero wear, I guess. And so the point of these literally 24-hour response cycle is that it gets the social innovators into a mood of co-creation. If they had to wait for 4 years or a quarter or 5 weeks, 6 weeks in order to even get their ideas considered, then people would not spend time on the co-creation. And so the whole point of participatory democracy is to listen at scale and to increase the bit rate of participation.
And it's not just over COVID that you've invited this kind of interaction with the population. Can you speak a bit more about the other participatory democracy projects that you've been running for the last couple of years? And I'm particularly curious to understand how widely adopted they are.
Certainly. For example, the mask availability map was built upon existing civic infrastructures that shows the air pollution. Now, it's not just environmental protection agencies building such environmental sensing devices. A lot of primary schools in Taiwan, as part of their data competence, media competence, not literacy, producers, not consumers. So producers class of data competence, they invite very young people, primary schoolers, to set up such PM 2.5 air quality sensing boxes and sharing them on a distributed ledger so that people could see this airbox network and divulge what really is going on when it comes to the mobile, immobile, or overseas sources of air pollution. A very similar network is there also for the water box, the water quality measurement. So in addition to climate science and data stewardship, we also use similar crowdsourcing mechanisms to make laws and regulations. In our join.gov.tw platform, where people could start petitions and comment on the regulatory pre-announcements and do participatory budgeting, there's more than 10 million visitors out of the country with 23 million citizens, so almost half of the country. And on that website, more than 1/4 of petitions are started by people who are not even 18 years old, so by young people, for example, on petitioning to ban plastic straws on the takeout cups of our national identity drink, the bubble tea, which was successful, by the way. And so all these increase the everyday participation into democracy by very young people, even before they are of the voting age. And I think the adoption, especially around the young population and also the very old population, is very high.
You really are putting some extraordinary theory into practice right now. How are the political classes responding, though? Because surely the end point of what you're describing is the end of legislators? Is it the end of elections? How radically is this going to remake, or could this remake our democratic model?
Well, I would say that the digital augments or assists collective intelligence. The digital is not here to replace collective intelligence. So to our legislators, they can, of course, work still on the implementation, the budget, the coherence of the laws, and so on. But they benefit from this listening as skill devices because they do not have the capacity anyway to listen to each and every one of their constituents. It was just not physically possible. But now, aiming to understand what the common values, the rough consensus of all the stakeholders in the society, were essentially crowdsourcing this common feelings, this rough consensus, these how might we questions that define the issue. But while we crowdsource the agenda, we do not crowdsource particular solutions. These solutions are just ideas or prototypes for the legislators to consider. I think that is partly why the four major parties, all the major parties in the parliament, just a couple of weeks ago signed on the Open Parliament Plan, on the National Action Plan on Open Government, because they all want to listen better to the citizens. That's about the only thing they would agree. Also, more international collaboration. That's one of the only two things they would agree. More democratization and linking to international community.
I want to see how this relates also to ideas about gender. As a gender non-conforming person myself, I'm super interested about how your gender experiences have informed your political philosophy. And you talk about yourself as being post-gender. It seems to me that you are against all binaries, because you are breaking down the idea that there has to be just two sides to any argument, because when you bring everyone involved, that sort of explodes that binary. Can you talk a bit more about how your gender identity or your gender viewpoint and your political philosophy intertwine?
Certainly. Personally, I'm naturally born with a very low level of testosterone. So when I went through my first puberty, when I was 12 or 13, I didn't go all the way, I guess, through the male puberty. And then when I was 24, 25, I underwent another puberty, this time the female puberty, but again, just for a couple years and not, of course, all the way through. And so to me, I don't have this idea in my mind that somehow half of population is more similar to me and half of population is not at all similar to me. To me, my community is a very large community, is the Homo sapiens community, and that enable, I guess, me to take all the sides and empathize more.
Talking of your two puberties, which was the best and which was the worst?
Well, they're equally eye-opening, I guess. And I still remember talking to internet commentators on Tyler Cowen's blog, and one of them saying, "You're the digital minister. How can you be non-binary?" Because digital binary, computers are binary machines.
Ones and zeros, yes.
I'm like, well, I'm a human. I have 10 digits, right? I'm a decimal digital minister. So to me, being transgender is not just about transcending existing gender binary categories. It also speaks to the wider intersectionality of, for example, transculturalism, transcending Taiwan's more than 20 national languages, many of which indigenous. And I spent a lot of time also on the indigenous communities, for example, the Amis, which is a matriarchy, or the Paiwan, which doesn't care about gender when electing leaders, and so on. So the more norms you travel through and the more sides that you're able to take, the more transcultural, not just transgender, we become.
I have to say that only in preparing for this interview have I fully understood the ways in which Taiwan, the Republic of China, is bucking the current trends. In 2016, we had a Brexit vote in this country. Of course, Trump was elected, and Modi and Bolsonaro around a similar time. And I feel like the populists and the destruction of democratic norms that we've seen in many of those places have sort of blinded us. They've taken all of the attention, and people have perhaps failed to truly understand that in Taiwan something really revolutionary is happening. You are creating new democratic norms in a completely different way. How far do you think you can go? And can you tell me, in your ideal world, how would you describe the role of government?
I think the government, which is a kind of singular noun, would become just governance mechanisms. Just as we say internet governance, we don't say the internet government, because internet is a set of interlocking governance mechanisms. The Internet Society, the IETF, the ICANN, and so on. These are the multi-stakeholder forums where people find rough consensus and running code by sometimes humming together, right? So there's already a strong tradition, a strong transcultural tradition of everyone who gets affected by any part of internet architecture to then join the working groups and contribute regardless of their country, their jurisdiction, or their age. I joined when I was 14 years old. Nobody said that, hey, Audrey is just 14 years old. I kicked them out, right? So because of that, I think this sort of governance where there's nothing about us without us, where it's participatory in the here and now, where the governance mechanisms are transparent and modifiable, hackable, forkable by the people. I think these are the internet governance lessons, the core lessons that I learned when I was 14 years old, and that I see widely applicable now that we have broadband as human right. The internet is not just for the few people who could enjoy broadband connection. Everybody now has the right to broadband connection in Taiwan.
And you describe your philosophy, or you describe yourself as a conservative anarchist.
Yep.
And I didn't know what that meant. So I bought this mug. And I'm going to read the mug to you, and then you can tell me if this helps. It says, "One who has literal conservative values and objectives, but is intelligent enough to self-govern through anarchism. Note, this person is not concerned with the standard ideals of the American Conservative Party, e.g. anti-abortion, Christian, religious, anti-gay, pro-gun, although they can incorporate these ideals into their personal political structure, even if they are not in fact literally conservative." Does this mug help us understand your description?
I think so, yes. It means that I take all the sides and conserve the existing traditions. That I think is very helpful. And the so-called anarchistic means simply means that I'm a Taoist. I give no orders. I take no orders. I just sometimes write poetry. I call myself a poetician for that.
Good. I'm glad it's broadly accurate. It's actually from the Urban Dictionary, which of course is an open source dictionary, so probably quite up your street. I actually wondered if perhaps you'd written the definition.
No, it's not me, but yay, collective intelligence.
Yay. So thank you so much for your time. I have to note that actually it's going to be your 40th birthday in a few days' time.
That's right.
So many congratulations for your birthday to come. And I'll send you a mug.
Excellent. Consider it received.
Audrey, it's been such an honor and such a privilege to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the great conversation. Live long and prosper.
Peace and long life.
Wow, you're the second person to get it right.
Closing the distance is about removing the space between us. What gets in the way of us having meaningful, honest relationships with our colleagues and from truly being in and creating community? If we talk about our fears, insecurities, pressures, maybe that communication will help us close the distance. It is hard to have those conversations, but you've just seen one. When Jess Search and Audrey Tang chatted, you learned so much about how deep even two strangers talking virtually can go if they come to a conversation open and willing to share.
Who are you?
I'm a woman, I'm a dancer, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, I'm a wife. And I bridge between races, I bridge between genders, really, I bridge between cultures.
When people see me, they think, on the way to old, balding, gray, white man. If you knew me, you would know that I'm shy. You would know that I'm lonely a lot of the time.
What are your intentions towards me?
To get you to like me, to get you to trust me. I want you to affirm me.
My intention is to be fully myself with you and not code switch. Black people don't tell white folks about their vulnerable places. So I was raised to pretend about my strength.
I pretend to not be afraid a lot. Or I hide that I'm afraid. Sarah, what do you need to feel safe?
I don't know if I believe in feeling safe anymore. I think I believe in feeling brave. Safety is something maybe that other people feel. I think mostly white people in this country, maybe white men, feel safe.
Walking through the world as me is to always carry a very small, gay, queer child who doesn't trust everybody, doesn't trust men as much as women, and doesn't trust non-white people as much as white people.
What is it like to walk through the world as me? It's to be misunderstood in a lot of ways because I feel like I'm always kind of proving that I'm black enough or, down enough or angry enough or, all of this enough. I mean, I've had moments where I'm just like, I hate my blackness or I hate my whiteness. And I've spent anguishing times in that space.
I'm afraid that you're thinking that I'm not down. I'm afraid that I could never make enough amends. My fear is that you think there isn't a future that we're going in together.
To admit my vulnerability, to admit my softness, to admit that I want to be in community with all people, including a white man, that's a big deal for me. And so I feel like I'm going to lose my street cred with that. And yet, we all lose if we don't have these conversations. So if we can find that spot that we're finding today with each other and challenge each other in a gentle way to do that work, then something real shifts. And I believe, because I'm a dreamer, I believe that that's possible. I believe that that's possible.
We have one last great conversation to bring you. The Solutions Project is an organisation that supports grassroots communities and climate activists. Gloria Wharton is the president and CEO of the Solutions Project. Mark Ruffalo is the organisation's co-founder. They both sat down with Washington Post journalist Karen Attiah to talk about some of the biggest issues we've been tackling over the past few days at the forum.
Hi, Mark, and hi, Gloria. Thanks so much for joining me today on this last panel of the Skoll World Forum. So this whole forum has been about closing the distance. And I think for this conversation, what I'm hoping to get out of it is really looking for how we can think about, after a year of protests and reckonings for racism, over climate, over just, reckoning with the inequalities in our world. I'm hoping that this conversation can help us think about, in some ways, how we move from reckoning and confrontation to justice and to rectification. So with that, I actually want to start off with you, Gloria. And in reading about your work, you've called yourself a solutionary, and that you're committed to radical inclusion. And in the wake of the turmoil of the last year, the protests over racism, this horrific pandemic, I'm curious, has your thinking about radical inclusion changed? And can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I'm really glad to be here, Karen, and really grateful to share space with you again, Mark. The first thing that's coming to mind is, definitely thinking that we're living in a time where our country and our world is calling for us to do better. And you mentioned the George Floyd protests, which really are, protests in general are like a basis for momentum to really spur change. And in this case, we witnessed a Black man losing his life. And the reality is that many have lost their lives to gun violence, by people in uniform, and slow deaths that are also happening in our environmental justice communities. And so people are literally fighting for their lives. And, the painful words, and I have to try not to get emotional when I think about them, but to hear, please, I can't breathe, my stomach hurts, my neck hurts, everything hurts. And for a country and people of color across the world to gravitate towards those words and really feel that it was a frame that captured their experience. Tells us so much about the times that we're living in. And you mentioned COVID, right? And COVID for me is really illuminating how well we're either taking care of each other or not, and who we're willing to sacrifice or protect. And it's organizations like the Solutions Project funds, grassroots climate organizations across this country, and organizations that are doing power building, leadership development, and community organizing that are really the backbone, and those that are providing mutual aid and COVID support and responding to multiple problems in ways that are having solutions that are actually addressing multiple problems at once, from racism to income inequality to environmental degradation. And so it really is Black, Indigenous, immigrant, people of color, women. It's probably no surprise that women are really leading this country during this time. And that's who we fund at the Solutions Project. We really believe that it's necessary to fund grassroots, climate-based community organizations. And we're a national intermediary. And so what that really means is, we are kind of like the liaison between a lot of grassroots organizations and kind of high net worth individuals, big funders, businesses, industry leaders, which are spaces that grassroots leaders often don't have access to. And so I find myself in a place of privilege leading this organization, and actually coming from 16 years of community organizing work. I used to run a grassroots organization, so I'm able to come into this work with a huge vantage point. And so we believe that we have to shine a light on all the work that's happening on the ground. And, it's celebrities like Mark and many others who have partnered with us. Mark is a founder of our organization, and they really lend their platform to elevate leaders and shine a spotlight on grassroots organizations and communities across this country that are affecting change. And we believe that it's these leaders that are innovating and really showing us what's possible when it comes to an affordable, clean energy economy.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about like that latter part of your question about how to move from the reckoning to the rectification. And so it really, I guess, is about acknowledging the harm that's been done since the founding of this country, whether it's been on Indigenous folks, other communities of color, Black people. You can think about sovereign nations and the attack that has happened there. We can go to slavery, to Reconstruction, to Jim Crow. And the residue of all of that still exists today. And so what we're fighting for, and what communities on the ground see, is that climate is an opportunity to create a new economy that doesn't have the same income inequality and racism and sexism that exists in today's society.
Fantastic. I love that you said that we're in a moment where people are voicing the harm and the power even just of that. Mark, I wanted to turn to you to sort of piggyback off of what Gloria has said. You've been in climate activism for years now, the fight against fracking in New York, and you've been quoted as saying firsthand that these arenas for change and in the world of environmentalism and philanthropy is very white, is very male dominated. Tell us a little bit of what it's been, frankly, as a powerful white man with a platform to be involved with grassroots efforts.
Yeah, I did have the privilege of coming to this work from a place where, as a frontline community member myself. And what I did see was who was leading this movement, really hardcore organizing in the trenches, were the women. And they still are. And that was started for me 10 years ago. It's not surprising, and no one who's really in the movement will refute that. But when you get into the actual organizations, it is white male dominated. and it is very old school, and it is oppressive, and it is not generally open to new ways of approaching these issues. And by the way, I would even say not even that effective. And so, my journey has been, and I think it's all of our journeys. I mean, we're in this moment of, I like to say revelations, not in the sense, in a biblical sense, but in the sense that we're seeing the reality of America, and the racism, sexism, misogynism, the violence that is built into the very DNA of our country. And so almost every I don't want to say every organization, but all of the structure of it, even when you get into the organizations, is this kind of white dominated thing, and people have been blind to it, and I think we can't be blind to it anymore. And so the conversations I'm having are, listen, I've always been kind of a radical. I was kicked out of all those places, but I would say for any man in an environmental organization, here I am going on and on. But any man, you have to listen. I mean, we have to be uncomfortable to make change happen. That's the only way we're going to make change happen. And that's allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable, especially as white males, and the privilege that we've held for 244 years in this country. It's going to take some listening, being uncomfortable, and allowing relationship to carry us through. And the one thing that I do notice about female leadership is it operates in a totally different way. It's not really top down. It's more of a community approach, and that's how I see how things get done. That's where I see that. That's why we won the fracking fight in New York State, was because it was the women who were running the strategy and the organizing.
So water and infrastructure issues have been in the news in the US over the last few months. I'm joining you guys here from Texas, where we went through a massive power outage failure, which caused millions of people in the state to go without power and water for weeks. But the same thing happened in Mississippi, and specifically in Jackson, Mississippi, where the coverage and the stories that we had around Jackson were quite different. Gloria, do you want to give us your thoughts and insights into how water and infrastructure, and the stories that the media tells about these things, how you see these stories being different out of Mississippi versus what we saw in Texas?
Yeah, I'm actually appreciating this question, Karen. I have family in Texas, also in Houston, and I'm actually originally from Mississippi, which is where my mom and sister and nieces and nephews live. And you're absolutely right. When the ice storm, as my family calls it was an ice storm because everything literally froze. When it happened, yes, it hit Texas hard, and it also hit Mississippi really hard. And I'll share a little bit of the story from Mississippi, because this is like part of the story that a lot of people didn't hear much about. But the same duration of time, Mississippi was in havoc, just like Texas. And the infrastructure there, the water infrastructure in particular, is older. And so it took a long time just for them to get water again. And so my family was also one of the families that people probably read about that was sleeping in the car just to stay warm, because, my niece and nephew, these are children, and didn't have, couldn't cook and didn't have food. And so I was able to call grassroots organizations in Jackson who were able to deliver food to my family and many other families who couldn't cook, and also delivered water because they were without water for nearly 3 weeks. Like, it was pretty wild. And it was my mom who called and was just like, oh my God, they're not talking about Mississippi. Why aren't they talking about Mississippi? We need help. President Biden needs to know. And then she was also the one who called kind of a few weeks into their experience, where she was like, oh, Gloria, we're on CNN. Someone was on CNN, and oh, they talked about us on The View, right? And so these were the things that actually mattered for my mother, because she said, okay, now they're hearing our story. And the first thing that she felt was that they're not talking about Mississippi and Jackson in particular because it's predominantly Black. And that was what her experience was, and probably the experience of a lot of people. And so there are racial undertones to this, that we never want to name. These are always things that are difficult to talk about and uncomfortable to talk about. But at the Solutions Project, every year for the past 3 years, we've compiled a report about kind of clean energy coverage in the US, particularly how race, gender, and equity play out. And in 2019, we found that less than 5% of US clean energy coverage even references communities of color. Yet we know that that's where most of the problems are happening, as well as the innovative solutions. And so across the board, one of the things that we're seeing is that the status quo way needs to be disrupted. Whether you're looking at media and who and what we cover and how we cover stories, that needs to be disrupted in an equitable way. When you're looking at philanthropy, that story needs to be disrupted. The way philanthropy has been investing dollars is actually, it looks like racism, right? And so I always think that a budget and how you invest your dollars tells a story. And the story that it was telling is that we do not value BIPOC and women of color leadership. And why was it telling that story? Because for years, these are the communities and organizations that have been historically disinvested and underinvested in for years. Yet we're in a moment where everyone's talking about equity. And what equity really is about, I often say leveling the playing field, but I'm going to push it a little further today. But I say leveling the playing field because if you're recognizing that these are places and spaces and leaders that have been historically under and disinvested in, then this is a time where if it's about equity, you got to over invest, if there's even such a thing, in these places, spaces, and leaders. It's like you grow up and you often think that everything's coincidental, but really, the same environmental justice communities of today are the same red line communities from way back when. It's the same narrative. And that's why things need to change. And people are saying we have to wake up to that reality. And it's not even just about leveling the playing field. We have to create a new playing field. Mm-hmm. And that's why people are taking to the streets.
In an environmental organization culture that is mostly run by white guys, to have Gloria come in and tell us those stories and frame it that way was something I never would have done on my own, never in a million years. And by the way, it made people uncomfortable. We lost people because of it, and it's challenging. It was challenging as a founder of this organization to be called out in that way. It was uncomfortable, but man, I am so grateful now that it happened. And I'm so grateful that Gloria is leading us and you understand why. And this is a transformation that I think we need to make. And it makes us bigger. It makes us better. It makes us more human.
We lost people, and as Mark knows, we've also been able to raise a significant amount of money with this message by letting funders know and high net worth individuals know that if you're really trying to be about equity, then let's do this right. This is an opportunity to disrupt status quo philanthropy, which is saying to fund commensurate with an organization's previous year's budget. And that keeps people where they're at.
One thing that, the two of you, speaking with me, a member of the media, and I just think about, again, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and about the problems that we have and the solutions that we have. So I'm curious, and I'm kicking this out to either of you. I would say that the mainstream media, we can be great at protests, we can be great at covering confrontations, but not always so great at covering movements, at, once the cameras move on, what is happening to those communities. And so I'm curious about what you think, what advice you would have even for journalists who, what must the media do to help be a part of the change? How should we change what we are doing and how we talk about these issues, particularly on climate?
So a couple of things. Yes, I think media, just like the role of government, just like our community organizations, just like our industry leaders, media has a critical role to play. And often all of us are influenced by the public debate, which media often frames. And so media has an opportunity to elevate the stories of grassroots climate organizations across this country, and the stories from their perspective, you know, talking about the problems and conditions from their vantage point, and talking about the innovative ways they address solutions that are addressing multiple problems. You know, often in our communities, it's not just about putting a solar panel on a building, but you know, you put a solar panel on a building, you're also planting trees, because these are communities that are highly concretized and don't have much green space. You're also thinking about who is going to be the person installing the solar panel on, you know, this affordable housing unit, for example. And the other part is like thinking about how we, grassroots organizations are often looking at a problem multifold. Why? Because they often say, you know, we live at the intersection of many issues. And so even though people are leading on climate and really trying to accelerate a clean energy economy, it doesn't just begin with putting a solar panel. Like they're like, okay, build affordable housing because we have homelessness in our communities and income inequality. And also let's put a solar panel on this affordable housing because we know that fossil fuel industries is the old way. And so we're trying to move towards the new way. And let's try to make sure that whoever's putting this solar panel on this building is a person from this community, someone who's been disproportionately impacted by climate degradation, and making sure that they're in a training program, that they get a unionized job, right? So they're thinking about multiple ways to address the myriad of problems that they're living with. So it's just it's not one solution, but it's a scale of solutions that often happen in these communities. And that's what media should be covering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mark, I mean, to sort of expand on this theme of the stories that we tell ourselves, you know, you as being a part of Hollywood even, I'm curious about what you think Hollywood should be doing more of in terms of, you know, not just, you know, individual actors, celebrities, you know, taking up their own causes, but how can Hollywood produce more stories that help us imagine a different world, a different way of being? What do you think?
There's a lot we can do. I mean, you know, there's a lot that actors can do with their platform, and you know, we have a responsibility with what we do with this privilege and this reach, you know. So there's that, and I have seen so much more activation in the last 3 years than I have, or 4 years than I have in 10 years on that level. I mean, people are really finding their voices. You know, I used to think that you could make a piece of art that would change the world. Now, I believe that the culture, the world calls that piece of art forward. There has to be a kind of listening, a readiness in the people and their thought and their understanding for a piece of work to really have significance in a particular moment in time, either political, culturally, socially. And we're at that place with climate change. I see it happening. I'm getting scripts that are directly talking about these issues and how they're related. And until we talk about them in their relationship, we'll never really be able to solve these problems. We'll never really be able to understand. And then lastly, you know what? Our stories are what connect us. It doesn't matter the color of your skin or where you come from. It's our story. You tell the stories of people, and everyone relates to them in the same way. And we don't tell enough of the stories about the people that we need to be hearing from right now. So when we see George Floyd, or we're watching the trial right now, we're hearing the stories of people, and we see ourselves in all of them. Whether you're talking about opioid addictions or poverty or class or just the human decency of seeing a man dying and wanting to do something for him, no matter who you are or where you come from. And that's what we believe this at the Solutions Project. It's why we're telling stories. It's why we're lifting up the voices that we are, because we believe in the power of a narrative storytelling to actually really touch people and change the hearts and minds of people in real time.
Perfect. All right, I'm afraid we are out of time. We could talk for hours and hours about these things, but Mark, Gloria, thank you so much for joining and for sharing your insights and for your leadership in this space. Thank you so much.
Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen, Mark, and Gloria. How fitting that we should end the forum with a conversation about solutions and grassroots activism. We came together to close that distance between some of our biggest global issues and how to solve them. It takes a socially distanced village to put on this Skull World Forum, and I'm going to take more than a moment to thank them. So whatever you need to do to show your appreciation, stand up, click your fingers, applaud at the screen, whatever, stand by. Program participants, thank you. Skull partners, we appreciate you. Empire team, thank you. Caspian Agency, Oxford Digital Media, thank you so much. Skull Centre for Social Entrepreneurship and the extended Skull family, friends and colleagues who made this forum happen, thank you. We hope that getting you here virtually helped you close the distance this week and connect with other people and learn a lot about yourself and others. Now what? Don't you hate that empty feeling at the end of an event? Well, we have taken care of that. You can continue connecting with other participants via the networking and community hub. It's going to be open for a few more hours. Watch sessions you missed at skull.org and follow us at Skull Foundation. Tell us about your work too. The Skull Foundation cultivates a global network of people and organizations working towards transformational social change. And if that sounds like you, or maybe somebody you know, visit skull.org/engage and tell us more. There is always more to say, but that is why we meet every year. Thank you for co-creating the 2021 Skull World Forum.